The world is changing faster than ever before. In the past 10 years, there has been an exponential technological evolution, the kind of technology that has revolutionized the world of work as we know it.
The Lawyers Hub was founded on the principle that law needs to interact more with technology, and that greatly affects tech policy as well as access to justice. So the Lawyers Hub exists as a confluence between law and technology, working on tech policy, on emerging technologies, as well as increasing and upskilling the knowledge of lawyers in the area of technology. We support tech startups as well to ensure that the tech ecosystem also engages in policy, but as well understand the issues around data protection, issues that also concern their structure, as well as intellectual property.
If you look at the evolution of technology, it's been relegated as an alternative in most systems. But the realization that 21st century has brought us into is that technology has to be an integral part of our day-to-day systems. And if you look at some critical technology areas like artificial intelligence, blockchain, nanotechnology, biotechnology, then it gives us a strong indication that if we do not start having discussions on the use of these technology areas, as far as law is concerned, then we may be in some kind of trouble. So Lawyers Hub is leading the debate on the use of these technologies, especially in Africa.
Over the years, the Lawyers Hub has supported the innovation ecosystem, convened events such as the Africa LawTech Festival and the Global Legal Hackathon. The Lawyers Hub has also supported government innovations within the justice sector, as well as trained government institutions and more than 10,000 lawyers across Africa on emerging tech policy.
Our dream at the Lawyers Hub is to have open access to law. We envision a continent where there is access to justice through leveraging technology and with a crowd of enlightened lawyers. We see a continent that also protects its own through better tech policies, that emerging technologies, through its regulation, will offer better value and consumer protection for the people within Kenya and within the African continent. We envision that we will convene policy makers, regulators, as well as lawyers who are more enlightened on emerging technologies and with better digital skills. And we invite you to be a part of this great vision for Kenya and for Africa.
Hello, how are you? Good afternoon. Welcome to day 2 of the Africa Legal Innovation Week 2021. We are delighted to have you with us. We had a wonderful time yesterday. If you're here with us, I think you can just say hi on the chat section. You can even raise your hand and just say hi. We noticed yesterday we didn't have much time to engage with our participants, and so we are inviting you to say hi. I think we'll kick it off with someone just telling us how they're feeling. It's very cold in Kenya, Nairobi. We are having a lot of rain. So I think I'll ask Dean Natukunda. You could kindly just say hi, tell us where you're joining us from, and your expectation for the day. Dean is unable to talk at the moment. That's well and good. Mariam is telling us good afternoon. Mariam Katif, advocate of Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome. Hello, I am Catherine from Namasaka and Karaoke Advocates in Mombasa. Welcome, Catherine. And also welcome to all of you who are here with us. We have an excellent panel and symposium just waiting for you guys and engaging with you. Yesterday, we had a wonderful time trying to unpack issues of, digital justice. We looked at alternative justice systems with Justice Joel Ngugi. Jason Tashia was here with us talking about justice as a platform. He took us through the report that he launched in collaboration with the World Bank. And so we were able to interrogate that. We also had a panel discussion just talking onto the transformation of, justice insofar as courts are concerned, trying to look at the kind of different challenges that they're facing, and also giving solutions and recommendations on the way forward. And so I think we had a really excellent time. We were also able to officially launch the Africa Legal Hackathon, which is currently ongoing. If there's anyone participating in that on board here, you can just engage us on the chat section, tell us what is your experience, what that is looking like. And I think we'll have a wonderful time tomorrow as we kind of go through the presentations and the pitches and see the kind of solutions that are going to have been offered by our participants. So without much further ado, let me just go on to the chat for a bit. We have Polycarp who's saying, hello, I'm Polycarp Moriasi, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and joining from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome very much, Polycarp. We have Quizera, that's David Quizera from Burundi, and I'm attending from Morocco. Happy to be with you. We are happy to have you as well. Good afternoon, Dean. Welcome. You're joining us from Uganda. You're a student of law at Ugandan Christian University. Welcome very much. So now for today, we are kicking it off with two key panels. We are going to be having discussions today. That's what's going to be centering the basis of today, where we are looking at the issues of, we are looking at the symposium. And to kick us off, we are going to be having a masterclass that is going to be running for the next hour. I think we thought it very useful to, instead of having, 30 minutes discussions where we are not really able to unpack, the context of the topic, let us have, hour-long discussions where people are really able to get into the issues, look at the, the challenges, float possible solutions, and just have a wonderful engagement in that regard. And so to kick us off, we have Pratik, who's going to be looking at digital transformation and artificial intelligence, and that is the adoption of AI across justice systems. He's going to be introducing his panel. I will allow him that honor and just now kick us off insofar as this discussion is concerned. We are happy to have you. Pratik works with UNESCO. He is a technology policy researcher working to understand the impact of digital technologies, more specifically artificial intelligence, on societies insofar as human rights are concerned, the issue of openness, inclusive access, and multi-stakeholder governance engagement. And so Pratik, I'm going to hand it over to you, and to our participants. Do have an engaging time. Engage us on the Q&A, on the chat section, and feel free to raise your hand as the masterclass goes on. Welcome, and thank you very much. Over to you, Pratik.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if you can see me. It says I cannot start the video.
Just a minute, we'll sort that out in just a minute.
Perhaps it's something at my end. I'm not sure. It was working before.
Okay, your video was on, but it's gone off. So just confirm that you're not using any other apps currently. Because we could see you. Yeah, we could see you, but now we can't.
No, I am not. Would it perhaps? Okay, now I can, I think. Would it perhaps make sense if I rejoin the meeting?
Yes, I think that's going to be fine. You can drop off and then rejoin.
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah.
I'll be there soon.
Okay. So in the meantime, I guess I can engage with our attendees on the chat section. We have one Stephen, IP and tech lawyer from South Sudan. Welcome. We have Ephraim Ndege joining from Nairobi, who's looking forward to being educated, and that you shall, I'm sure. And then we have Fanis, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, who's also based in Nairobi. So Pratik is back with us. Okay. Are you able to hear us?
Perfect. Yes, very well. Thank you so much for the very energetic introduction this morning, and really great to see all the participants from across the continent. And I'm really glad to be representing UNESCO today here. I'll quickly introduce the panel. It's really kind of an informal discussion. I will share something about the Judges Initiative at UNESCO, and then really open the floor with our two great panelists. One, Ms. Jhalak Kakkar, who's the Executive Director at the Center for Communication Governance at the National Law University in Delhi, joining us from India. And we have Judge Rafael Leite, who's joining us from Brazil. And he has been leading a lot of the work in Brazil on their Justice 4.0 project, and is very knowledgeable about digital transformation in the justice sector. And I had the opportunity to talk to him recently, and we learned a lot about the challenges of getting the data and getting the systems to work. So I will not take much longer. I will just introduce what UNESCO is doing. We've seen that justice systems worldwide are using artificial intelligence to analyze large amounts of legal data, to help lawyers identify precedents in case law, to enable administration in judicial processes, freeing up human resources, supporting judges with predictive systems, which are somewhat problematic. So I think we will discuss that a bit in the panel. So UNESCO has broadly been talking with judges and judicial operators globally since 2008 as part of our Global Judges Initiative, where we've trained about 23,000 judicial operators across 150 countries on issues related to freedom of expression, access to information, and safety of journalists. In 2020, we decided to launch a program on AI and emerging technologies. But first, we really wanted to hear from our stakeholders. So we launched a survey of judicial operators where we heard from about 1,200 judges, lawyers, legal practitioners, researchers from about 100 countries and we identified two areas. One, the use of AI in justice systems for administration, and the legal implications of AI broadly in society. Based on this work, we have developed a massive online open courseware, which my colleague Charlene will be able to share with you in chat. The registration for this is open, and this will be in March next year. So I would really invite all of you to register and join in this dialogue. But without further ado, I will now pass on the floor to Jhalak Kakkar, who will talk about how AI can be used for civil and criminal investigations, as well as for law enforcement. Jhalak, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Prateek, and thanks to the organizers for having me here today. It's really nice to sort of step out of the bubble within India and interact with stakeholders working in this space globally, and get to hear from people like Rafael from their lived experiences of trying to implement these systems in courts. So I'm going to sort of talk about the use of AI not only in sort of law enforcement, but I'm going to talk about it more broadly in terms of its deployment within the judiciary. And I think maybe Rafael will probably speak to some of the more practical challenges they're seeing with implementation. But what I'm going to sort of bring to the table is, as a civil society stakeholder in a country which is looking at sort of deploying artificial intelligence within its court systems, what is the sort of thinking and concerns we have at this stage that we would like to see sort of pulled into the process as sort of India and other global South countries look to adopt various sort of forms of technology and digitize their courts further. So I think, of course, artificial intelligence systems are increasingly playing a significant role in the discharge of critical democratic functions, whether it's justice delivery or its adoption of AI by law enforcement agencies, right? In the judicial system, we're seeing it being adopted for administrative functions. So whether it's case management or scheduling of hearing dates, or its docket management. They're also helping with things like jury selection, review of contracts, e-discovery. We're also seeing their deployment for very conceptual tasks like providing support for legal research, undertaking risk assessment of offenders, and even making decisions in certain sort of small causes kind of cases. So we're seeing its deployment at various levels, at very, very administrative levels to very, very conceptual levels. And I think one thing that we need to keep in mind is when we talk about administration of justice, when we talk about access to justice, even questions of administration in courts becomes sort of relevant from an access to justice perspective. So when a case is being scheduled, often when it is members of a vulnerable section of society, judges will take into account their ability to, travel to that court, other constraints they may have in representation. So there are many various factors that need to be taken into account. And some of the concerns arise that, how much of this can be taken up by an AI system, and how much of this, you still need some kind of human oversight or involvement in making these kind of decisions. And these are all sort of discussions that need to be had within the various stakeholders that are relevant. And I think, we need to harness the benefits of technology, but I think we also need to be cognizant of the sort of challenges that could come in, of the ways that we may unthinkingly further marginalize already vulnerable sections of our society. On the law enforcement side, we're seeing the adoption of AI for predictive policing. We're seeing adoption for, use in facial recognition technology, for use of digital evidence in prosecution. Especially facial recognition technology has, of course, given rise to many concerns globally, and there have been ongoing conversations on how it impacts the privacy of individuals, the broader negative implications for the society, for our society, in terms of, ability of people to freely associate and gather, the freedom of speech and expression of individuals. And globally, civil society organizations have been calling for a moratorium or a very heavy regulation of this technology. So we're seeing many applications of artificial intelligence on the law enforcement side as well. And I guess, what I want to frame this conversation as is we need to move ahead with the times. We need to harness technology, but we also have to keep doing this keeping in mind the many challenges and risks that arise with the adoption of this technology. And we have to do this adoption, keeping it in consonance with sort of human rights and constitutional values and concepts and notions such as rule of law, which are very sort of abstract and sometimes difficult to articulate. And when you see the benefits of technology on one hand, sometimes it becomes difficult to, weigh them against these abstract notions that we're talking about. And I think, having public consultations, having stakeholder consultations, people who are really working on these issues helps flesh out and articulate specific issues that can be studied and sort of kept in mind. I think besides, of course, stakeholder consultations, and other sort of issue that we see coming up in the global south is openness and transparency around how the technology is being adopted. So very often the use of AI systems by judiciary and law enforcement, these systems are designed by private sector entities and are proprietary. And one of the concerns that sort of comes up often is because they're proprietary technology, they're not open to any sort of public audit or scrutiny by experts. And hence, maybe some flaws and challenges that arise may not be possible to point out and even pick up on. So are there systems and mechanisms that can be put in place over here, right? So for instance, AI systems are known for sort of the challenge of bias. And that's something we talk about, it's a fundamental problem that people talk about, right, in the context of AI. And if that bias in an AI system, in the way it's designed and deployed in the judicial system, results in denial of judicial services or discriminatory risk assessments or wrongful convictions, we really have to give careful thought to what is the approach to develop these systems for the judiciary. Who are the stakeholders involved? What sort of like human rights impact assessments are being conducted? Who is conducting them? Who has access? And what is the sort of transparency and accountability mechanisms we are designing around the deployment of such systems? So there has to be high level of continued public trust in the judicial system. And I think we have to think of ways to continue to engender that trust when we deploy these technologies. And mechanisms will have to be put in place for that. So I think we have the US, we have Brazil, we have UK, we have India, Argentina, Colombia, Estonia. All these countries across the globe are deploying sort of systems in their judiciary, in their law enforcement, right? And some of the uses of AI, that are most prominent are, for instance, the Compass system, which is being used which was used in the US for assessing chances of recidivism. The HEART system in the UK, which was also a model to predict the risk of recidivism. And recommend low-risk offenders for counseling programs, right? But there are also, and Prateek sort of alluded to this, is there are sort of significant concerns around amplifying societal biases in sentencing due to historical data sets that we are relying on. And at least in the Indian context, we've seen that there's so much bias that has come into, which is based on the caste and religion and economic profile of individuals when sentencing takes place. And there are increasingly studies that are happening in this context. So if we're going to go on those past data sets, what are we setting ourselves up for as a system? And then if we're not going to use past data sets, then how do we move forward? And these are really questions we have to ask ourselves, and areas that we have to think about a lot more deeply. So places like Estonia are initiating pilot programs to use AI to settle small claims disputes. US and UK are using sort of chatbot lawyers. I'm sure Rafael can talk to the use of Victor in Brazil, and I will sort of leave that to him because he'll be better placed to talk about that. And so, there are, many benefits, like the chatbot lawyers in the US and UK are helping people challenge parking fines and violations free of cost, right? So I'm not saying technology is all bad, but I'm saying let's not get swept up in the, this claim of, technology is the new utopia, which will open up access to justice and courts. But let's be sort of cognizant of the many challenges that we need to unravel and sort of tackle and address to ensure real access to justice, to ensure that people are able to access their fundamental rights, that we really have rule of law in our democratic societies. So I don't know how long Prateek wants me to sort of speak for, and I don't want to sort of keep going on. So maybe I can stop here, or maybe I can highlight some of the other key concerns around transparency, explainability of AI systems, data protection, or maybe we could just take those in the Q&A.
Perhaps I think that would be nice, Charak, to I think you've set a very good introduction of some of the conceptual issues. Also presented a kind of a typology of what kind of AI systems are being used in the justice sector, highlighted the human rights and rule of law concerns, the need for stakeholder consultations, kind of made us conscious of our overwhelming tech optimism sometimes, and the need to really think about access to justice which is grounded in reality of our countries. And finally, the importance of openness and transparency in how tech is adopted itself. So I think this allows us to segue very well into some of the points from Rafael, who will go deeper into the Brazilian justice system and the project that they are working on. So I would now invite Rafael to share his remarks for about 15 minutes, and then we can have a more freewheeling chat with the participants and amongst the panelists. Over to you, Rafael.
Great. Would it be possible for me to share a presentation, or would you rather have me just talking?
I think you should be able to share the presentation.
Yeah, Yeah,
Yeah.
now I can. Great. Okay, are you seeing the presentation?
Very well.
Okay, so thank you for the invitation to talk about digital transformation in the Brazilian justice system. Since that was the topic, I think I'm going to give you all a quick dive in what's happening in Brazil. So I'm not just going to talk about AI. There's a part of digital transformation that regards AI, and we'll talk about that also. But in Brazil, we're calling the program Justice 4.0. And the first question might be, why 4.0? And the answer is regarding the fourth industrial revolution. So it's this new way of producing systems and having connectivity and using automation and machine learning that's changing not only business and industry, but also changing how public service is made. So in this context, it does not make sense anymore to think in justice like we did before. While we are at this discussing the Justice 4.0, I think it's nice to get some quick facts about Brazil. So it's a big country. It's the fifth most largest country, has the seventh most populous it's the seventh most populous country in the world. It has more cell phones than people. It has 424 million digital devices. It's almost more devices connected to the internet than the double the number of the population. We have 1,500 law schools. Some said that we have more law schools than the rest of the world combined. We have 1.2 million lawyers. Our judicial branch workforce is more than 400,000 workers. Out of that, around 18,000 are judges. We have 91 courts, 75.4 million active lawsuits. And out of every new lawsuit, 96.9 are electronic. And out of those 91 courts, 48 are completely electronic courts. There's no paper lawsuits. I would add to that, just as an interesting fact, Brazil has the biggest Black population out of Africa, not for historic good reasons, but I think it's an interesting fact. I'm not a good representation of most of the population, but I think I should bring that up. Okay, so back to Justice 4.0. I need to state that it's not an initiative not only from the National Council of Justice, but also from the Federal Justice Council and from the United Nations Development Program. And together they are working in the Justice 4.0 program that aims to bring justice for all with innovation and effectiveness. It comes from the Brazilian National Council, as I said, and aims to promote access to justice through the development of collaborative actions and projects that use new technologies and artificial intelligence. Out of the Justice 4.0, I would like to focus on these 4 projects. So it's the 100% digital court, the Quartz virtual service center, data judge, and the digital platform of the Judiciary. So starting with the first one, the 100% digital court is the concept that justice as an online public service. It should be disconnected from the physical headquarters, and citizens should be able to use technology to access justice without having to physically attend to courts. All proceedings, including hearings and trial sessions, are performed exclusively in those courts electronically and remotely using online video conferencing platforms. These initiatives began in last year, and it already reached more than 30% of courts. So in more than 30% of those courts, you get a digital court and you can have all of your lawsuits filed and decided through digital means. Even though it's just 30%, it's well distributed in all the country, and you even get states that are over 80 or over 95% of the implementation of this project. We also have the Quartz Virtual Service Center, and it intends to determine that every single court should maintain in operation during working hours a video conference tool that allows lawyers and parties, if requested, to be assisted remotely. So you don't have to take a cab or go physically to a court. You can talk to the judge or to the public servant through a video conference means. And that's the objective of this system. Of around 15,000 courts, individual courts that answered the requirement, we have more than 2/3 that already implemented the virtual service center, and they're using a varied sort of video conference tools. So it's become quite present, and you have increasing availability every day. With DataJud, we have a national database of the judiciary, and it stores proceedings data and metadata from all physical or electronic, public or confidential lawsuits filed in Brazilian courts. So we have a constant overview of what's happening in the 91 courts. Here we can see that it has in its database over 384 million lawsuits. I said that we have 75 active lawsuits, but these are lawsuits that go back to the year 2015, and it gives constant updates on what's happening in every court. It also makes it possible to see the total number of new cases, how many cases were ended, the number of decisions and rulings and settlements and hearings, the types of lawsuits that are happening. And it also makes it possible to highlight eventual inconsistencies in data, making it possible for courts to correct it and make the whole system work better. Even though we have 91 courts, the way each step and every subject and types of lawsuits is the same from the northern states to the southern ones, and they have a common consistency, and this centralized systems help them to keep that consistency in mind. So the other project that I would like to dive a little bit deeper is the digital platform of the judiciary. But what would that be? But first, I should probably present some background. Since the year 2000, the Brazilian judiciary has gone through an intense pressure to digitize its caseload. Since it's a big country and frequently lawyers have to take long flights to go from a court to the appeal court, you can get in some situations more than 20 hours of dislocation, or even days if you're in a city up the Amazon and your only means of transportation is a boat. You can go on for days until you get to the court. So digitizing that caseload was a priority, but we ended up with multiple electronic process systems. And in 2006, we had a law regulating those electronic processes. And in 2013, a single system was established. But up to this date, we still have a lot of different systems. Each court has one. We do have some conversions, but you still have that multitude of systems with lawsuits. And that's the context in which you get the need for the digital platform, because in the platform, you get a single place and a single architecture that will make the lawsuits able to communicate with each other. If by any chance you have a lawsuit that has to go from one court to another, or receive a document from another lawsuit in a different system, the platform has the intent to make that easier, and make a single convergence point in as in a technological point of view. It wants to make the system convergent. There's a video explaining it. I got just a snippet to show you and states the main point. So it's basically a place where you can collaborate. If you make any developments in your particular system, you should place it in the platform, so it will help not only your particular system, but every electronic process system working in other courts. So this will tend to make a convergence that will take us to a next level of development, and that's what we expect to increase the speed at which we're making the digital transformation. There's the link for that video. It has English subtitles if you need, but what would it feel like using the platform? So it basically will connect to every single system, but we envision also a way that you get to connect to it directly. And if you do, you'll get to a marketplace where you get different applications. And the intent is that it should work like your smartphone app store. So if you're working with a lawsuit and you need a specific functionality, you can go to the platform and use it to help you with solving that specific case. From that platform, I selected 4 systems that I would like to present to you. And the first one is called JUMP. That JUMP stands for Judiciary and Process Mining. Process mining is an area of research that tries to show the flow of processes, not only in the judiciary, but in industry, in any field. It shows how the lawsuits in general flow through a court. You got a heat map showing the step that concentrates the most lawsuits, indicating that probably you have a problem because they are stopping there for a reason. And you can also select the level of detail of how your caseload is behaving inside a certain court. You can also show it by how much time a lawsuit stays in a specific step or a specific proceeding, and it maps it out just from the metadata that's available in electronic processes. So it's a management tool, very useful for judges and for the public servants. The other system is called Sniper, and Sniper stands for National System for Research and Retrieval of Assets. It highlights relations between individuals and enterprises, assets, making it easier to find relations, networks, and laundry schemes to evade the reach of justice. So it's something that's used when we're trying to find specific information or validate what was presented to us in a specific lawsuit. That's the kind of visualization that's made possible by that data that we have in the electronic process systems. Okay, now getting finally to AI, that's another system that's part of Justice 4.0 that's inside the digital platform of the judiciary. And the system is called Synapsis. It's our national AI platform. It enables courts to host and annotate data sets. They can do version control, distribute and audit artificial intelligence models. It also permits the implementation of endpoints for the models and control feedback regarding their predictions. It's the platform that talks to the electronic process systems and give them AI services. This is some information regarding the projects that we have active now. We have 41 projects in 32 different courts. They are also distributed all over the Brazilian states. So we have at least one AI project in each court, in each state. The system, with the help of the UN Development Program, is now receiving not only the AI teams from the courts, and the state of Rondônia team is the one that was responsible for this system. So it's one system that came from one court and was made available for every other court in the spirit of the platform. And we're receiving also academic universities. They are bringing their teams to help and to build new AI models. The models that we are implementing in Brazil, they don't do what others say they do. So we're not trying to replace judges or civil servants. They are related to identifying relations, themes in decisions, indicate the next step in a proceeding, summarize some text, or indicate that if a certain lawsuit needs special attention due to an injunction, or present to the court suggestions of ways to classify it and have a better procedure overall in analyzing their data. So that's the kind of AI model that we are building. And we are in a big initial infrastructure project that is called Codex. It intends to aggregate all data from all lawsuits, from all those 75 million lawsuits, in a single system in the cloud, and make it available to be used for BI productions, or smart and unified searches, or automated statistical data feed, providing data for new AI models to enable those process mining views that we saw, or even data science in general in the legal field. That's something really new that will be made able through this system. It works like a data lake, so it tries to gather all information from all the system and make it readable to the computer and to the AI systems. It basically makes each lawsuit visible as this kind of unit. You have every single document present, you have the structured data, but also the unstructured data. The textual content of each document is translated to a kind of data that the computer can read and treat. So every single of the 75 million lawsuits, until we are projecting it to be real at around 70 million in next year's end, so a year from now, we will be able to see them. And with that, we can use strategies like comparing one lawsuit to other one. The number that I'm highlighting there is how similar the lawsuit I was looking at was to another lawsuit. So it said it's around 81% similar to that other one. So this is data used with AI to indicate similar lawsuits and help judges and public servants give decisions that are alike, or justify why you're not giving a decision that's similar to that one. So this is the kind of development we are going through. It's a structure one. Here's also a video that's in our National Council of Justice YouTube channel regarding Codex and how it works. So just stating that it tries to make the data visible to systems. I went a little bit through my time, just general view about digital justice. And here's my contact if you need it. I would be glad to talk to any one of you. And thank you for inviting me and having me here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rafael. This was really interesting. For us at UNESCO, it's super interesting to do two things. One is to learn from perspectives from different regions, and also to facilitate that linkage and knowledge sharing. And also for us, it's important to have technical experts and legal experts talk to each other and kind of start speaking each other's language, or at least understanding that, because that really facilitates dialogue and for us to move forward. A lot of times we have people having fears of, as you mentioned, judges being replaced or lawyers being replaced. But what we saw from your presentation is twofold. One, access to justice being strengthened through different tools. And I saw that we can even do video conferencing using WhatsApp in Brazil, which is super. And also on how to streamline internally the process, the investigation, the linkages within the justice system. So it really helps shed light and clarify as to how these technologies are being used. I see we have about 10-12 minutes. The floor is open for audience questions. So please feel free to share your questions in the Q&A, or if you would like to put it in the chat, or if you would just like to take the floor, if that option exists. I have one question in the meantime, though. So when we talk about access to justice and technology, it also has the potential for exclusion. For instance, I would say there are three entry points for that. One would be connectivity. As you mentioned, there are some regions in the Amazon where you cannot physically reach, and there is a lot of time which it takes. But is there enough connectivity? And this is broadly a question also to Jhalak, to learn from what are some of these challenges in India. Second, being affordability of being able to access these tools and services. And third, being the skills and the confidence to be able to use these and interact with the justice systems, because it can seem a bit imposing already to interact with such formalized systems for people who are seeking justice. And then we add another layer of people having to navigate technology, which maybe they are sometimes not too familiar with. So some three broad thoughts. If you can have responses from both you and Jhalak and Rafael, would love to learn. And the floor is open for Q&A as well. Open, perhaps if Rafael, you'd like to go first.
Okay. So the concerning the digital impaired, or those who have difficulty to have access to digital systems. One of the reasons I pointed that in Brazil we have a lot of cell phones and smartphones. It's something that impressed me. So the first, due to the pandemic, we had no way of doing the hearings, specifically in my lawsuits. I had to make them through video conference. So the COVID pandemic was, I think it was a really great incentive for innovation, because you had no other way of giving people access to justice through other means. If you did, you would put their lives on risk. And something that impressed me was how much easier it was for them to have access to one smartphone or to a webcam or to a LAN house or somewhere that they could get connectivity. It was actually much cheaper for them to get to the hearing through a smartphone than to physically go to me. And I said Brazil is a big country because sometimes I have on my jurisdiction people that are 500 kilometers away, 1,000 kilometers away, and they have to take transportation for them and for witnesses and for the lawyer, and it costs a lot. If I do it through a video conference, the only thing they have to do is get near a cell phone tower, and most of the time, even though Brazil is big and huge, it's closer than I am to them. So it's actually the digital barrier, it's a lot lower than the physical barriers and economic ones that you have in the lives of most people. I think that happens here in Brazil, but it happens also in Africa or in India, and it happens with all populations nowadays that have do not have the means to get to justice. If we make it digitally available, if justice is something that you can install in your iPhone or on your Android phone, we will be relevant for them. They will have a way to access justice. Probably will reach a lot of people that were never reached.
Thanks, Rafael. I also would like to hand over the floor to Jhalak for quick remarks. And I see that Claver wanted to also take the floor. If you would like, please feel free to jump in after Jhalak. Yeah, Jhalak.
Pratik, I think, like Brazil, India has, made a lot of strides in bridging the digital divide. But if I sort of look at some of the numbers, I think while in urban areas, I think internet connection is like at 106% between broadband and 2G sort of services. I think in rural areas, and I'm speaking off the top of my head, but I recollect that the data is somewhere around the 30-35% mark. So I think that is sort of one of the challenges that we do face, is how do we really allow for access to court systems. One of the interesting things that's happening in the Indian context is the government has been building common service centers, which are these sort of hubs within a sort of a smaller rural area. So depending on the size of villages, it could be for a couple of villages, or if it's a larger village one. And that is a place typically where there is at least some electricity and access to internet. But this is still sort of a work in progress. Very often, there's been a large push in India to deploy optical fiber networks to bring broadband connectivity to rural areas. We've reached sort of the block level, but that last mile of connection to the smaller villages is still sort of a work in progress. So I think there is that sort of question. The second question in terms of infrastructure is how many people have smartphones. Again, data here is a bit variable, but estimates are anywhere from 20+% to about 55-58%. So again, and that is like the national average. I'm sure if you look at it from a rural perspective, the numbers may be lower. So I think the question is, okay, as litigants, how are they going to access these services? What is the kind of access to mobile phones or computers, 2G services or broadband services they have? And then secondly, it's also a question of having adequate legal representation to take their cases to the court. And very often this legal representation is not available to them in smaller places. So for that, they do need to come to the larger cities where they will be able to access such judges, such lawyers, etc. So I think there are sort of many moving parts to this, which sort of link into the ability to create this access to justice through the digital platform.
Thank you, Jhalak. So it's not only access to justice, it's first access to technology, internet connectivity, and then access to justice. So we have two layers of access that we are talking about. So the floor is open. If someone would like to speak, I saw that there was Yusha and Claver who wanted to take the floor.
Hi, sorry, Pratik. I'm here for the next session. I'm just
okay.
Added
Okay. So that's
sure.
That's a good prompt for me to start closing. Then we have one question in the chat, though. I'll read out the question and the response, and then I think that will be about time. So Charles is asking, how can this system, which Rafael talked about, be applied interpretively globally to address international cyber crimes, bearing in mind the different jurisdictions? So also sometimes we have the tools, but how can we actually learn from those and adapt those tools to different jurisdictions? So Rafael has responded. The systems in Brazil are being developed to be freely shared inside the Brazilian judiciary, but to other jurisdictions, the same access could be made available. Thanks for the kind offer. And I know that Rafael was also very keen to engage with the Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa because there are a lot of similarities. UNESCO, for instance, is also working with Brazil and Portuguese-speaking countries on South-South cooperation for freedom of expression and access to information. We just signed an MOU this November. So the relations shown in the graphic derive from network theory and are bound to a specific jurisdiction. So the information and interpretation would also be usable. So I think this is again a question around access to the data to be able to create those tools, and to what extent in Brazil you have this data digitized and available in formats that algorithms can be trained. But to what extent is this available in other jurisdictions will influence how these tools can be built. I would really thank you all for joining us in this session. I think this would have been, we can go on, and there are so many ends to discuss in this debate. Not the least, we've not covered transparency issues that Chalak wanted to talk about, but we are out of time, and I believe I'll hand over the floor to Rispa for the next session then. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Pratik. I think that was very insightful. Just before you hand over the session, I think there is one issue that I'd probably want you to address, and it came out during Jalak's conversation with regard to just, accessibility and connectivity issues. I think my question is quite broad, but are we jumping the gun, especially in the African context? We still have people who are underserved, people who are not connected. So are we jumping the gun in trying to figure out, some of this technology without really making sure everyone already at the very basic or base level is able to access? So maybe you can speak on that as we wrap up, and then we can be able to move on to the next session.
For sure. So I think connectivity is a big issue, and not only connectivity, affordability. And so I can speak from UNESCO's perspective, and then of course hand over the floor to Rafael and Chalak to add their reflections. For UNESCO, we've been working with the UN Broadband Commission to really work on digital skills for people. So we're working on the soft side of connectivity. It's not only the infrastructure, which is generally supported by the International Telecommunication Union, which works with network operators to reduce costs, to provide support and standards. We are working on how to get more people online, and how can they engage actively online? Is there enough local content? Because a lot of times there is not enough content in the languages that people speak. So there are all these issues which also link up when we talk about access. That would be kind of my 2 cents on this point, but also really keen to hear from some of the people joining us from Africa on what their thoughts are on this as well. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Pratik. Rafael, Jalak, would you want to jump in with just final comments on the same?
I might be looking at the world through a pink glass. I think trying to see all the world through what happens here. But I would say that a fundamental part of it working out was that lawyers were a big help. So we don't need to look just at the population, but if we look at lawyers as hubs themselves, they can make the connectivity reach everyone that needs to be reached. So probably even if you're not in a good place, but what I say, it's much more effective if we have also the way of the digital, if we make it possible for people to also connect. and not only expecting them to have themselves, the cell phone, or themselves go into court. Because if we do that, we are making the situation, I think, worse. We live in a time that we have this at hand. So we have to try to make the best use possible and use everyone that's a part of the justice system. The justice system isn't just the judges. It's the justice system now is judges, lawyers, and technology. It's all that, trying to get the justice system to everyone, everywhere, as fast as possible.
That's a great insight, Rafael.
Yeah.
I think, and Jhalak, would you like to add?
I think I'll sort of take off from Rafael's point that the fact that, digital access is one thing, but even physical access is difficult for many people, right? There is that reality. So if that physical access can be bridged through a sort of a hybrid form of digital access, that is something to think about and consider and sort of work out. And I think we have to look at all options on the table. And the world's never perfect, right? So we have to sort of balance everything, take the realities of the situation we are in into account, and move forward in a way that allows people to access justice, allows the implementation of rule of law, allows the upholding of fundamental rights. And I'm sorry, but I have to leave for another call. But it was such a pleasure speaking with everyone today and hearing Rafael and Pratik's thoughts. And thanks to the Africa LawTech Week for having me here.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful, wonderful panel and very insightful comments. I think at the end of it, that last comment insofar as making sure there is a one way or the other where everyone is able to access, justice and be connected. That at the end of it is what is important. It has to appear, justice has to appear to be done. I think that's a key takeaway as well. I don't know whether we can give Ramald Nasa a chance to say something as I introduce the next panel. No? Okay. I think he's unable to speak on his end. So thank you very much, Pratik. I'm going to release you guys to go on with your day. Once again, thank you very much. So we'll swiftly move on. Okay. We'll swiftly move on to the next panel, which is an open panel discussion. It's going to be looking at the legal tech in Africa. So the different trends and practices that we find here back at home. And I think the discussion that we've had on AI is a really great build up to now seeing what exactly is happening. In Kenya, we say on the ground, vitu kwa ground, quote unquote. That means what's happening in the Kenyan context, in the African context. What are the trends and what are the practices? And so joining us for this particular session, it's going to be moderated by Sumaya Omar, who's a lawyer based in Kenya. She's a legal tech lawyer. She does a lot of, she's involved in a lot of privacy data protection issues. She's been great insofar as just trying to convene different kind of discussions, especially under the Africa LawTech Festival. I'm sure many of us have interacted with her in that regard. So I'm going to be allowing her to take over this session insofar as introducing our panelists go and also just leading this wonderful discussion that you're about to have. So we'll be back after the break. Kindly stay with us.
Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, from wherever you are. Thank you for the introduction, Rispa. Just as it was mentioned, my name is Sumaya Omar. I'm a lawyer, a mediator, and arbitrator, currently a trainee lawyer at DLA Piper, but also a former tech policy fellow at the Lawyers Hub. So these are my people, and I'm happy to be here today. So the panel discussion that we have today here is a very interesting one. First of all, because it has a lot of amazing and very competent people from all over the continent, but also because it's an open discussion on legal tech in Africa. And we're basically going to look at the trends and practices that have been happening of late, right? And so just as an introduction, I feel like it's important, first of all, to discuss and just understand for everyone who's not a lawyer and is on this call today, on what legal tech is, right? And what has been basically happening in the continent is that over the last 5 years, over 35 plus innovative legal solutions have come up. And this is because they're trying to bring disruption in the African landscape as to how we deal with legal work, as to how we deal with access to justice, and as to how we deal with innovation. And so what we're doing today here is basically having a panel discussion on that, but also trying to see how innovation has been used and how innovation works in the legal space. So just as before we start, I want all my panelists to introduce themselves, because I feel like only you introduce yourself, in the best way possible. And I'm seeing Leah is on the call, so of course, ladies first. So Leah, you can go ahead and introduce yourself, and tell us something small about yourself.
Oh, thank you so much. My name is Leah. I'm Black City. I'm from South Africa. Huge legal tech fan. Previously co-founded a legal tech startup called Nominate. I've recently transitioned into head of business development at Legal Interact. I wrote a lot, actually published a book last year on legal tech startups and innovation and what that means for the legal industry. And then I speak a lot. Like here today. So it's good to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Maybe we can go to Cleaver next.
Good morning, Smaya. Good morning, everybody. My name is Clavel Nigarura. I am managing partner at DLA Piper Africa office in Burundi. I'm very happy to attend this session. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cleaver. It's nice to have you too. And lastly, Yusha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yusha Davidson. I'm from Cape Town, South Africa. I was previously in Big Law at Worksmans in the corporate commercial and competition space. I then left and co-founded some legal tech companies and Salt Network as well, all of which are VC backed. And yeah, just loving the legal tech space in SA thoroughly.
Well, thank you, Yusha. It's nice to have you too. I think I just saw another panelist who just joined the meeting. Hi, Desmond. How are you? Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Sumlia. This is Desmond. I'm connecting from Ghana. I'm more into information security and privacy, and also practicing as a lawyer with a law firm called Quartz & Co. My focus is more on fintechs and technology regulatory compliance. It's nice having you.
Okay, thank you, Desmond. Nice to have you too. Okay, so we'll just start the ball rolling. For the participants and everyone who's either watching from YouTube or Zoom, please feel free to post your questions on the chat for the speakers, and at any time they'll respond to them, or we can also have a Q&A session at the end of the session. Yes, so just picking up of the introduction, Leah said that she was a previous or is a founder of a legal startup. And so Leah, I'm just going to throw the ball here at you and ask you, what do you think were the advantages of having a legal tech startup vis-a-vis the traditional legal practice?
I often like differentiating legal tech, particularly startups, in terms of big law and people law. So what Lenomo is doing was more focused on justice, access to justice initiatives around enabling online legal services and documents for small businesses. At that stage, we had also scaled into Lesotho. And one of the key advantages of this that I discovered, not only from myself as a mom, was really just the ease of it, for being able to actually do what I love, which is law, but be able to do it from home. Even before the pandemic, we had already transitioned. But from a user's perspective, it was just the ease of access to the platform, because we had made it available online. We had tried to ensure, our colors were very bright, so everything was just yellow. In terms of our messaging, was also in line, because a lot of times, and as much as people in the tech space or startup space struggle with product market fit, what is missing is actually a language market fit. And that is where oftentimes, as legal professionals, we struggle in terms of meeting the market, because we're still speaking legalese. And through the startup, not only through the legal documents that we drafted, it was really plain language type of movement, through the designs, explanatory videos, around really ensuring that everyone is on the same level of understanding when it comes to what your legal rights are and so forth, because you cannot really effectively exercise those rights if you don't know about them. And oftentimes, as lawyers, we make it very difficult for people to actually understand what the law is about.
Thank you, Leah, for that. So what you're basically trying to tell us is that the use of technology has eased your work, but not only that, but it's literally how access to justice can be facilitated in our continent. And I think that's a very brilliant point. And I'll just throw that to Cleaver, since as a practitioner and in the day-to-day practice of law, how do you feel like, how have you seen technology impact access to justice?
Thank you very much, Maya. Technology allows us to face the challenges, especially in this time of COVID pandemic. It was, for some jurisdiction, possible to see courts online, to attend the trials online. So access to justice with technology, I think it's a best way to access justice with, of course, so many challenges, as what they were saying about infrastructure, about the capacity, the skills, but I think it's the best way to access justice.
Okay, thank you for that, Cleaver. I'll throw this one to Yusha, because I feel like as a practitioner, you have a bit of more insight on this. Leah, in her discussion, mentioned that most lawyers are, struggling to meet the market and are trying to, move from the traditional practice to, tech. And what do you think of that? What are your views on that?
I think so. In the SA market, especially, so there's been a rise in ALSPs, alternative legal service providers, and I think that's where you're seeing an adoption of legal tech, because that's a very easy way for them to stay competitive and really compete with the big players. So what you'll find is that in SA specifically, the market is sort of divided between small, medium, large, and the ALSPs, and you'll find that there's a distinct adoption of tech across those various categories. So your big law firms are adopting tech that's been developed abroad, so in the UK and the US, whereas your small, medium-sized law firms and some of your ALSPs are really adopting your local tech to stay competitive. And there has been an increase in the adoption of tech across the board, I would say, but it still is a lot slower than what we're seeing in the UK, the US, and the greater parts of Europe as well. But what I can say is that COVID has really spurred on the need to adopt tech. I mean, initially I was still in practice, and COVID just came, and they said, "How is it going to be possible for us to work from home? Is it going to be possible?" And all these law firms, we were all panicking, and suddenly everybody discovered cloud servers, cloud storage platforms. Everybody was now scrambling to see what was out there, and that's exactly I think that's the one benefit that came out of COVID for the legal industry. The only problem is that what we still haven't seen is a change from just because you've adopted tech, the pricing still unfortunately remains the same unless you're practicing in an alternative legal service provider, where your fees are almost fixed and can take into account the use of your tech to drive down that price.
Okay, interesting. And just to pick up from that discussion, you mentioned law firms integrating and, big law, small law, all trying to, fit into using technology, for access to justice and for innovation. This reminded me of our context in Kenya and how first of all, just to begin our discussion on one of the trends, right? So one of the few trends we've seen in Kenya is that smaller law firms were adopting technology at a very high rate compared to larger law firms during the pandemic. And what this showed is that despite the fact that you might, consider the resources are not as much, right, compared to big law, they really adopted technology really fast, especially the solo practitioners. They went all cloud, they're doing courts virtually, etc. And so there's a huge adoption of technology on that part. But on the other end, we've also seen big law, since of course they do have the facility and the resources, they're also using technology to become creative. And if you look across Europe and the trickle effect it has to Africa right now, for example, the organizations like DLA Piper, they created tech holding companies, to deal with how they facilitate technology throughout, the continent and in all the places where they're based in Africa and Europe, right? So I feel like there's something, there's a discussion there that we need to have, and to look at why, certain small or big law or even medium-tier firms are adopting technology, in the way they are, and what can be done to facilitate that. There's something interesting you mentioned in your discussion, that despite the fact that we're using technology, the prices are still the same, right? So clients are still having to pay the same. And I don't know, Leah, maybe you can take this from us, because I know you're both a practitioner. And what do you think about that? Do you think that now we have technology, our prices should be lower, or the fact that we're now using softwares and apps and all these things, then we should actually increase them?
I mean, the ideal outcome of all of this, of integrating tech, the whole purpose of it, and why eventually I ended up, because Lombo was literally like a consulting company, and then we transitioned into tech. The core reason was to try and drive down the costs, because I believed in the market that I was serving, and I believed that they deserved affordable, quality legal services. So that should be the end goal. But I mean, there's a conversation to be had specifically in relation to lawyers. Sometimes we can be a bit elitist in how we view things, but we must also remember we are also receptive and to the market. Sometimes they don't want you. If they think you're too cheap, it's a problem, then you're not good. So there's also that perception from the market that lawyers are also fighting with. So even if they are adopting the tech, they are making use of it, there's also that particular issue that you have to deal with.
For sure, that makes sense. Yeah, and Desmond, from all this discussion that we're having on how big law and small law and lawyers are generally adopting technology, how do you think that impacts security for clients now and their documentation and all forms of privileged information? I'm sorry, Desmond, you're mute. Please unmute yourself.
2021, we are still figuring out how to unmute. All right, so I think generally, like every other technology that you would implement, you need to also consider the ethical and other legal obligations that comes with it. So access to information, ensuring the confidentiality of information, ensuring the privacy of information, both comes in both ways. And especially because I'm practicing in the security, more security bias to technology, you look at what sort of controls that you are putting in place. Because is either you have your administrative controls, properly intact, and then you have your technology controls also properly intact. You cannot really rely on just the conventional use of the platform and assume that it's going to come with, the needed controls. It must be enforced. So, for instance, if you take a litigation management system, you're still going to deal with the issue of access control, the principle of least privilege. How much can the law clerk see from that system? How much can a practicing lawyer see from the system? How much can the receptionist see from the system? So it's the same access that you'd conventionally would do. If the receptionist is not able to go into the physical archival system of the law firm, how is it that you are procuring a litigation management system that would allow her to do that? Because she's actually going to see the workflow. She's going to get access to the kind of information that you may not want them to see. And we all know about the lawyer-client privilege issue. Indeed, it's said that officers of the law firm are presumed to be covered with that privilege, but there is also the likelihood that you are given access to information or records that would not inure to the benefit of your clients, whether you look at it from the legal relationship point of view or even from a regulatory point of view. Having said that, I also think that whilst we deal with the issue of legal tech, we are at a point where we quickly must begin to look at the convergence. Okay, now in the past 2 months, I have been engaged in the cybersecurity and its convergence to law. And out of my research, I'm able to figure out about 10 different regulatory compliance, which even in Ghana, fintechs, financial institutions, and non-banking financial institutions are required to adhere to. And in the component of it is cybersecurity. And this is not just because you are saying it as a consultant. This is because a law has been drafted from the lawmaker and requires them to have these things in place. So from anti-money laundering, we are required to have certain cybersecurity practices in place purely to ensure the security of AML systems, which are under the control of the reporting entity. So you could see that as a lawyer who is providing the advisory to these entities, I have to go beyond just reading the text of the law for the purposes of compliance of AML. I have to look at the convergence of technology, how the organization is supposed to implement this technology so they could be compliant with the regulatory requirement from the lawmaker. And it goes all the way to national identity, data privacy, cybercrime, critical national infrastructure, AML, which I have mentioned already, even intellectual property. So yes, it's legal tech. We have to embrace it. Look, we have a legal, our procedure, civil procedure, clearly amended to include video conferencing for the purposes of depositions and evidence taken from witnesses. That is very progressive. But in the spirit of doing that, you ask questions like, if we were doing a video conferencing cross-examination, what happens to the due diligence of ensuring that the witness is not being fed with the information on the other side? Because if the witness were to be in the box in court, that would have been enforced. So those are the things that I practically see from my engagement so far. These are the things I practically see that as we move towards legal tech, and during the masterclass, the issues of the ethics of AI or ethics in AI, keep popping up from the various projects that's going on across the world, Brazil and the rest. So these are things that we need to begin to consider from the word go if we want to address issues of disclosure and access to information. Because once you move any resource, you move onto tech. From a security point of view, you have exposed it to the risk of tech, including cyber risk. Okay, so we need, the way we approach these things conventionally, we need to take that mindset into legal tech. So we ensure that there's privacy by design, there's security by design, there's confidentiality by design. And I personally think that that would be the most plausible way to get going, especially since we are all jumping on this bandwagon. But yes, it's legal tech, and I have personally been having meetings with my clients on WhatsApp, and it saves me the journey. I joined this call at 9 o'clock because I had to drive to court. I need to stop in the middle of the way to join, as in come on this very one. So I have been listening to the call on my phone whilst I drive, and I've been driving for about 45 minutes. I just need to finish this, and then I'm jumping into court to go and do cross-examination. So it's legal tech. It's nothing else. We need to embrace it, and we must put in the measures to make it work.
Desmond, you said something interesting on the whole aspect of security or privacy or, confidentiality or vis-a-vis disclosure, by design. And I just remember the funny scenario in Kenya where, again, on the mute button issue, and so it was during a court session, and, all parties had logged in, and we were waiting for the judge to come, and, it was a hearing, and opposing counsel unmutes his microphone, probably by mistake, right? And starts talking about his case strategy. You get, and so that was funny because before we even get to, putting safeguards in our system, and it's as easy as the whole, you remember the whole cat lawyer thing that went viral? Was it last year, early this year, the cat lawyer who went viral? So you see, there are small things I feel like as practitioners or as lawyers, it's important for us to think before even going to the big things like security by design or, privacy by design, because we don't even know how to use our mute buttons properly, right? Yeah, so I think that was a very interesting take. And when you mentioned the whole issue about convergence of, cybersecurity to, or rather technology with the legal practice and having, cybersecurity measures put in place, I think that's very important. And despite the fact that most countries, including Kenya, also have, amended the civil procedure rules to not only include video conferencing, but also to allow service by email. So now you can, serve someone by email, you can serve them by WhatsApp, and, there's already a laid down procedure on that. So yeah, I think also the law is getting to a point where it's trying to progress or rather catch up with technology, which is also very affirming.
Just to add up, we also have 3 high court decisions. One which allows you to serve a service via Facebook, another which allows you to serve a service via WhatsApp, and then another which is more omnibus, that any electronic platform which is deemed, identifiable to the parties in the case, you can actually serve them, electronically. And I personally have gone to court to 6 solicitor service, maybe because I'm technology biased, to serve a party through WhatsApp, email, and then his official Facebook account. So I think, yes, that's something that is quite important. And on the issue of the privacy by design is as minute as the slightest thing that we have to do. Now, imagine if there's a concept around, there's a privacy or security concept or confidentiality concept in terms of just policy around doing your depositions or taking evidence via video conference. Definitely, the one in control of this system would have muted everybody because it would have been the first requirement. And you are only going to be on mute when the judge is seated and you have to announce yourself. That would have saved these gentlemen the embarrassment of talking about his case on the court. So when we speak about privacy by design, we're not necessarily looking at plugging the technology, plugging a policy. If the technology has the feature to implement the policy, so be it. But if the technology do not have the feature to implement the policy, then of course you now ask that you get that sort of feature into the technology, or you take a mitigation strategy to ensure that it works. So I'm on the same page with you.
Okay.
Jumping on the mute thing, I now keep hammering on this. There's a need for literally from law students upwards, whether you're going to practice or not, whether you're going to open your own law firm or not, there's a need for actually a baseline for tech competency, purely because of the world that we live in as lawyers, in understanding tech and leverage tech. And because I know in South Africa, for example, if you're going to open your own firm, there's a specific course that you take. They do have a tech component to it, but there's no practical element to it. And that for me is worrying, considering the type of solutions that, an attorney is going to come against when they enter into a firm, or even when they start up their own firm, because they need to figure it out and understand just the basics of tech. I mean, not even going through the different solutions that we're building, just even understanding word can be so powerful. So yeah, that's my 2 cents there.
Yeah, thank you for that, Claire. And as someone who just recently, finished the bar school and I'm transitioning into practice, every day I see the importance of that. The fact that most of these things, most of us just know out of curiosity, or the fact that we got opportunities to work with people who are tech savvy, right? So it's not something that comes for everyone, and that's also a bit sad. On to Clever. I'm a bit interested in seeing or finding out what are the kind of technologies that are now being used that are boosting the legal profession.
Thank you very much, Smaya. I think there are 2 reasons for lawyers adopting technology. The first one is to respond to challenges. I will have given the example of this court session online. There is a need to respond to the client's needs. If my client gives me an engagement and they oblige me to sign online, I don't have any other choice than knowing how to put an electronic signature. The other reason to adopt the technology is related to adding value to our clients. Some law firms are adopting technology to make automatic their expertise, like in merger and acquisition, in improving how they are drafting contracts, in improving how they manage their law firms. I think there are many reasons to adopt the technology, but to be honest, there is also a cost. We can't avoid this matter of costs, because this comes with a budget. If you want to adopt tech in your law firm, you have to put in place to have that money to put in place all those technologies. Another point I want to add is that this tech era is coming with a new legal practice. My brother was talking about the ID, the AI. So there is also this law being adapted to tech, and this also a very big opportunity for lawyers to understand the perspective of laws in the digital era, because it seems it brings difference when we are talking about taxation in the digital era, or talking about competition in the digital era. It's not the same. There is I can say a new legal practice coming with it. So those are my views on this particular question. Thank you, Maya.
Thank you, Clever. And I think you just preempted the next segment, and we look a bit into innovation. We'll make a small segue into innovation, and I think I'll go with Yusha first. So we've seen there's a lot of tech adoption happening in South Africa. I might add the most in the continent so far. That's why we have 2 South African speakers here today. But other than that, can you share your perspective as to how the South African legal tech network is working, and more on that, are there like alternative providers in the continent?
Sure. So, behind the scenes of what we do at the South African Legal Technology Network, we sort of try and bring all the legal tech players together, all the startups together, and ask them what are some of the concerns that they're having, try and onboard them with a couple of customers, get them some funding, and then also link them up with a lot of the service providers that can help them scale, be it Microsoft, AWS, etc. And so I think, in every country, the legal tech sort of goes through these phases, and the initial phase in legal tech, in innovation, is generally starts off with almost an e-commerce platform where you can purchase templates, legal documents. That's your first rung, and then we start taking it to the next step, which is sort of going into your practice management solutions, contract lifecycle management, document automation, and then it starts going into more things where they start using natural language processing, machine learning, and really driving down into hectic levels of tech. And I think right now in SA specifically, we're sort of sitting just before that phase, the hectic sort of adoption of pure NLP and ML, natural language processing and machine learning. But what we are seeing in SA is that there's a big interest from VCs right now in legal tech. And that's really coming from a perspective of seeing legal tech not under the banner that I think we're all seeing it as just under the banner of legal tech, but more under the banner of tech. So VCs are looking at your legal tech product and saying, okay, actually, this can be used in various other industries, not just the legal tech space. So what we're seeing now is that, the recent accelerators looking at legal tech solutions and saying, okay, this can actually be applied in the fintech space. And I think there needs to be almost a move away from looking at as your product as a legal tech product, but more as a tech product. But yeah, like I said, there's the B2C market is always going to be an issue regardless of what solution, regardless of what industry you're playing in, fintech, legal tech, health tech, insurtech. B2C is always going to be an issue, and the funding that's going to B2C versus your B2B solutions is always going to be tough. And access to justice is inherently linked with the B2C market, and that's sort of why the hesitancy from funding and also from scaling comes about. So what you're seeing is that the people who are surviving, the startups that are surviving, are either playing in the B2B space or the B2B2C space. And right now, I think there needs to be they almost need, if you are going to invest in legal tech, there needs to be this, the confidence that you're in it for the long haul, because we really are in its infancy stage, and it's going to take a long time for not only adoption from your customers, but also from the legislators as well. Because a lot of the tech products that people are thinking about coming up with just aren't allowed in SA yet. For example, automating the conveyancing process, that isn't allowed yet to begin with. So there's a couple of hurdles that legal tech is facing that sort of your other industries don't face, like fintech, insurtech, where you can just disrupt at all stages. But yeah, this is where we're sitting.
Oh, thank you for that. So I think in your discussion, I noted two important things that I think will take us to the next segue, still on innovation. So I think I'll ask this to Leah. So Yusha mentioned something on, there's a lot of funding and big interaction, by VCs happening to legal tech startups. And of course, that's one of the biggest trends we've seen, in the last year or so. And this has come from a place where, African, legal tech or even African startups were struggling to get funding. And now it's a point where even we're seeing, phenomenal female founders, not only male founders, but there's a lot of encouragement on female founders to get funding. So what do you think of that in the legal tech space? And do you think it shows a danger in the future because we're not getting funded by Africans themselves? What do you think of that?
I think it really boils down to how we position ourselves. And I think Yusha was correct around the whole B2C market, and mostly it's being geared towards, justice, and there being hesitancy. And that is true. I remember being in a meeting with one VC, and he's like, Leah, make up your mind. Are you a social entrepreneur? or like, are you a tech founder, So it's really about the messaging and how you as a founder, when you're pitching the solution, your business model, how are you pitching it? How are you positioning it? The market landscape in terms of, how big the market is, and showing that it's actually scalable. And I'd have to agree with the fact that our solutions are actually applicable in a lot of industries. I mean, when you look at one of our solutions, the legal matter management solution, it's actually literally like a workflow management. And that can really be used. And we've seen that different applications, even within a law firm. So not only from a management, legal matter management perspective, but also for reporting. So if they have a big client and they're accountable to them around how they need, or how they're handling their matter and so forth, that can actually be used to do that. We've seen its application in the property industry around, literally from ownership of the property, lease agreements, how far they are triggering those obligations in the contracts as to when they need to pay and so forth. So literally our solutions are very scalable across multiple areas. It's just how we are positioning it. Because I think, and I also fell into that trap for a very long time. When you love the space, you get into it and you get so, you don't want to let go of it. You really become very siloed in your approach, and that can be very limiting.
Yeah, thank you for that, Claire. That's very insightful. And on the whole aspect of positioning ourselves and owning our own narrative, I just felt that I should at this juncture mention that Africa Legal Innovation Week has been done by the Africa LawTech Festival, but also by the Lawyers Hub Kenya. And what the Lawyers Hub do in Kenya and hopefully expanding to other African countries also includes the fact that they help startups accelerate, incubate, and pitch, position themselves out there and own their narrative. Other than that, I feel like there's a lot of such technology fluid companies are also coming up, and they're also encouraging Africans to own their narrative and to pitch more, which I think is very important. I also feel like most as Africans now, we should be moving to a point where our innovation, even in funding, should be done in-house. We should look at more on how can we collect revenue within the continent, instead of going outside the continent. Yeah. So I think on that note, just as we wind up the discussion, and probably I'll ask Desmond on this, but we've been talking about a couple of trends here and there. What do you think is the potential for legal tech in Africa? You can unmute yourself.
Yes, don't worry. We are going to take this to 2023. Learning to unmute. Okay, so about the potential, it's more like saying that what's the potential for technology to Africa? And the answer is huge. Actually, we can only breach the said gap if we are able to find a common playing field with technology. And it's the same thing that I see for legal tech. Access to justice. I read Kenyan law reports because they are online. That's awesome. Sometimes I don't get the decisions that I'm looking for, but I know what the position of the law is, and I'm trying to see what other civil law countries are looking at. So I jump on a law report portal. I could go to a blog and listening to what people are saying about the position of the law, and it's because that content is delivered to me through technology, right? I could join webinars like this, and it's because it's done through technology. And so if you're looking at the net effect on legal tech on our practice, it is not necessarily going to replace us as lawyers. It's actually going to enhance our practice as lawyers. And access to our law reports, access to litigation management systems, how you manage your schedule. Sometimes it could be overwhelming, with all the notifications that are popping up on your phone for various cases, various depositions, various consulting, retainers, and all that. These are things that can be solved with technology. These are things that technology can control. And if you are minded also to be control of your schedule, you could easily work with it. We have access to what we call e-justice in Ghana. And it's basically lawyers jumping on a platform to file their suit. I admit it is not all perfect, but it is a start. It is good enough to know that you can begin filing your writ by doing it from a digitized system. It is good enough for you to know that when you get to court, the judge is able to tell you your process is not before us, probably is in the e-justice. You know, that gives you comfort that, okay, someone is in control, as against when it used to be all about human beings, and you know, the human error is unsurmountable. You can even file a process and be told that the process doesn't exist. We have not seen it. And what are you going to do? But you have a case where LegalTech will tell you, you can provide a notification from your phone or your laptop, your email account saying, I filed it on this day. And it's their word against the word of the system. And I tell you no lie, we will believe the system against them. That is the practical effect of LegalTech. You know, look at all the other possibilities. You know, you should mention about the COVID, the incoming of COVID, and the fact that now we are jumping on remote platforms. Ever since COVID and the embracement of remote platforms, clients who are more inclined to technology are ready to have that conversation over a remote platform. So now you are not short of time when your client is supposed to be there for a deposition, when your client is supposed to be there for conferencing. No, it's a matter of which platform is convenient for us all. We jump on it. We record the session, and it's as good as sitting down to listen to that client. For me, LegalTech is an avenue of practice, not just the availability of the tools. I am doing full practice in technology compliance. That's like a new area in my kind of world. I'm doing technology compliance because the regulators are popping up various regulations which requires you to converge technology to deliver a certain service. Fintech, insurtech, even mainstream banking, you know, and that's what is happening in Ghana. So the effect of LegalTech, there's no other way for me to say but giving those practical examples. It has already caught up with us. You can check with Lex Machina. People are making decisions on cases before they get to court. That's where we are now. And we are fighting arbitration in foreign lands where people are using these technologies to even determine whether they will win the cases against us or not. So it's just like the football field where the Europeans are playing so well because they are using big data trends to determine which player should sit in a particular post. And that is what is happening to LegalTech. So I'll just sum up by saying, we walk away from LegalTech, it means we are actually walking away from the benefits of technology. If we are embracing it, we are embracing technology in its entirety, including the nuances it comes with: privacy, confidentiality, security, cyber threats, and all these things are there. And so we embrace it holistically. We develop our solutions with you know, that kind of concept in mind, and we should be quick enough to look at what the possibilities are in the conventional world as against the technological world and try to marry the two. We can start with a dual process. Like in our courts now, it's okay for you to appear before the judge to have your evidence taken. It's also okay if you are not in Ghana or you are not closer to the court to opt that be done via video conferencing. If we may get to a point in time where we probably have to shift to one, because that is what we have all accepted. So in a nutshell, it has come to stay. It is worth embracing, and I think and I know that that is the way to go for us.
Yeah. Thank you, Desmond, for also encouraging us, young lawyers, that tech is here to enhance our work, take our jobs. For a second I thought my law degree would be useless, but yeah, thank you for that for me. Yeah, so I think this has been such an amazing discussion, and I can't believe our hour is almost up. And maybe just to close this discussion, I'd like all the panelists to maybe tell us one trend, or just choose one trend that you've seen in the legal tech space, or one trend that you foresee being a big thing in the tech space, and then look at how now, or just analyze it from a point of perspective of how does that that one trend, or how does it have the ability to affect the future of the African legal services market. And so I think I can go fast. And of course, from a young lawyers on practitioner perspective, is that one of the huge trends that I've seen past last year to this year, and what I do foresee happening, is that there's a new generation of young lawyers. And what this means is that there'll be more young people interested in tech, more young people interested in how legal tech works, more lawyers, again, scaling into uncharted territories like data protection, information security, issues of, cybersecurity, looking at fintech, looking at VC founding, etc. So not only young lawyers, but also generally young practitioners interested in the tech space. And this effect, of course, has the impact of affecting the African market, because now there'll be younger founders, younger people starting their own shops, starting their own legal services, starting their own, startups, their own, firms that are, legal tech compliant. And so that's one of the trends that I've seen happening. Most of the people in this tech space were not here 10 years ago, or were not in this tech space 10 years ago, right? And so in the next 10 years, I foresee a space where people are now highly specialized, right? So people are into specializations in the tech space and are now moving with it. So yeah, I think we can start with Cleaver.
Thank you very much, Smile. The trend I see is that in the near future, there'll be much work in terms of technology adapted to document management, because as lawyers, we are reading so many papers. I foresee a trend where technology is helping us to manage our documents very efficiently and very quickly. The other trend will be related to process of delivering legal services, process of managing firms, and another trend I see, it will be related to cybersecurity, because so many informations will be online. I see cybersecurity providers with so much work to do, interacting with the lawyers, and that is what, in brief, what I see for the near future. Thank you very much, Ismail.
Thank you, Cleaver. Blair?
Thank you. It was a great session. In closing, from my end, I see a lot of very self-aware lawyers, and also the sophistication not only of the type of tech that we're building in the legal tech space, but also of the partners. I mean, when I started, there was no Yusha. I don't know, maybe I would have been far. There was, you were literally, in a little tiny hole figuring things out. And the only type of assistance you could get was literally foreign assistance. And it becomes very difficult because the type of challenges that they are facing are very different from ours. So you cannot simply just cut and paste whatever that they're doing and try and implement it here. And so seeing the growth, of ecosystem builders like the South African, like SALT, when you're seeing a lot of startups coming through, not only from the online legal service arena, but also those who are building towards big law. And by that, I mean your matter management solutions, your contract management solutions that are built on the continent. That for me is very encouraging because it tells me that there's actually a lot of progression. And if this is the case now, it's going to be incredible in the future. You also look at the type of courses that are also offered. I know Africa Legal is offering courses specifically on legal tech. That is new, but they're responding to the market in terms of what is happening on the continent. So it's quite encouraging. And I think there is a huge potential from our end, and I'm very optimistic. Well, I'm always optimistic about legal tech, so, but yeah, thank you.
Okay. Desmond?
Yeah, this time I got the unmute up first.
LegalTech.
Okay, so so I see it in 2 or maybe 3 contexts. There's the aspect where Africa is on the run to regulate tech or to provide some sort of regulations around tech. So that actually creates a trend of actual practice where lawyers need to study and understand both tech and the law and even the business context, so they can advise their clients or the ecosystem to be able to engage properly. And also sometimes to advise, government, because I have seen some of these regulations which I actually think are either going to stifle the technology practice or maybe would even stifle innovation on the part of some of these fintechs. And over the time, as you advise them, you could get them doing some sort of stakeholder engagements with regulators. So I see the legal tech, I see that regulatory aspect of it, which will create direct practice. And you've seen some already. There are people who are now practicing seriously in data privacy, people who are into cyber law. Blockchain is actually a huge conversation now, and we are looking at the integrity of blockchain, issues about non-repudiation and how that can fit into legal tech. In fact, there's also development around blockchain to deal with smart contracts. I'm sure Leah is already eyeing those areas because she is already into the development of these tools, so that's a crucial area that I have seen. The other one would be to do with where you are using technology to support legal services. So they are not really technology tools built like the ones Leah will build, okay, because that's another avenue where they actually have the tools which is delivering more or less your legal practice. But look at those aspects of technology that is supporting the legal practice, the process. So you're looking at the remote access tools, collaboration tools, which will allow lawyers from different firms around the world to come together on the same platform, execute a single project, okay, do research on a single context, and come up with a single document. So I have been part of a research team that had to wholly work online. And to date, I've never met any of those partners before, apart from seeing them on a virtual platform. And we've produced some awesome documents that has ended up as the end product for a client, who is globally placed. So those are the 3 major categories. I am not trying to limit myself to just single point based, but I think we would have a lot to do with the regulatory space in terms of regulatory compliance, which will be wholly and heavily technology. We would have to also look at where we benefit from technology that is supporting the legal services, and also look at the last aspect where we build technology-based tools and deliver, and all must be, I agree 100% with Leah, we have to look at it from an African context. Most of these solutions really do not even match to what we do. We always have to come, like the lawyers who say mutatis mutandis, you modify when necessary, modify it when necessary, so that's actually my input on that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And just to close, Yusha.
So I'll go very quickly. I think 2 trends that I'm seeing is that you're finding a lot of lawyers are leaving practice nowadays, and they're going into tech, and they're going into all areas of tech, insurtech, edtech, health tech, because what lawyers are slowly starting to realize is that they can fit into business, and businesses are also realizing that lawyers are a fantastic addition to any company. And then a second trend that we're seeing is that, everybody's no secret that fintech is blowing up in Africa. The amount of money that's flowing from VCs to fintech companies in Africa is in the billions of dollars at the moment. Legal tech is only a few years behind that, and North America, Europe, and Middle East they've already cottoned onto this fact, and a lot of their products are starting to come into the African market. And so what I would say, what the biggest trend I'm seeing is that everybody knows that it's just a couple of years before legal tech becomes the next fintech. And so if you have an idea, don't wait. Start building it, because everybody else knows that Africa is really where it's at the moment.
Thank you for that. I think we ended our session on a very good note. Yusha said, don't wait, start building whatever, innovative legal tech product you have. I also, want to just thank the panelists for, being able to make it and joining us for this discussion today. It was really insightful. I think we could continue for another 1 hour if we had the time to do that. So thank you so much, for coming through for this, and thank you everyone, for logging in. I'm not sure if you have any questions, but in case we do, we'll deal with it in the next session. Feel free to reach out to any of the speakers on their social media handles, and follow them, look at the good work that they're doing, and try to support them as much as you can in whatever you can. Yeah. So thank you so much. I think I'll go for a break.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the rest of the
Bye.
Bye.